State Rep Ron Sandack. He's on the line with us right now. Ron, good morning to you.
Good morning, guys.
Thanks for taking time out of your morning for us.
Happy to do it.
Well, it's all been cleared up then. I guess these were just educational emails. We can all go home now, right?
We know more than we did going in, but there's still a lot unanswered. But look, it was good to go through the process. Much was learned. The political aspects of, addressing violence, unfortunately, was a main component of the two-day session. There was politics involved, and unfortunately, they superseded a good intended goal of trying to quell violence in the city of Chicago.
Yeah, Ron, I think the takeaways from the 2 days, if we look at it, I'm not sure we heard any testimony that would lead us to say that there was criminal activity involved in this program or the handing out of the money. What we heard was a lot of mismanagement. We heard a lot of incompetence, not just from those in the administration, but those who were implementing the program. And as you said, we saw a lot of political concerns taking precedent over actually helping the violence problem in Chicago.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty apt conclusion. Look, Chicago and state governments have reputations, and those are well-earned and deserved reputations. The fact of the matter is, in August of 2010, and by the way, here's something that we didn't learn. No one wants to take ownership of whose idea the darn thing was.
Mm-hmm.
Not one person said, hey, this was my idea, my program. I owned it. I take responsibility. It's my fault. No one wanted to do that. In fact, many people pointed the finger at others. So there's no real ownership. But here's what we know. In August of 2010, there was unquestionably very heightened awareness of some really horrific events and unbelievable violence going on in the city of Chicago in certain neighborhoods. And there was a hue and cry for some, help, which is understandable. But let's make sure we're clear. That violence it wasn't just happening in Chicago. There are other urban areas where there was violence. But of course, that's the city of Chicago was Pat Quinn's, base, essentially. And so someone said, hey, we got to respond to this, which was true. And they put together a hastily put together project. I mean, it was within months, and no one could answer. I asked Jack Lavin, have you ever seen a program in your 20 years of state government that went from idea to implementation in 6 weeks with $50 million of taxpayer dollars at stake? And of course, he rambled on about something else. But the answer is he couldn't point to any instructive example.
So, what did you hear during all of this, I guess? Because, I'm sure you had a pretty good idea, as many people might have, about what's going on. What did you hear anybody testify to that raised an eyebrow, that made you lean back and go, wow, I didn't expect to hear that?
Actually, the explanations. Here was these witnesses were well practiced and rehearsed. Their entire response to a question was to always fall back and kind of reset to, look, we had to do something. This was really happening in really bad neighborhoods, disadvantaged neighborhoods. African Americans, primarily Hispanic people too, were calling for help, and we needed to help, and government helps when people are in trouble. So we always kind of, defaulted to that emotional and understandable response. But we're saying, well, wait a minute, okay, so if you're going to use taxpayer dollars, shouldn't you do so in a thoughtful, meaningful, methodical way to really address the problem? If you really meant you wanted to address it, let's do it thoughtfully. They kept saying this was an emergency. It was like a tornado going through Washington, Illinois. You immediately send help. You announce there's a state of emergency, and you worry about the paperwork later. And that's what happened here. We threw money at it to try and quell the violence, and yeah, the paperwork wasn't really well done, and yeah, we don't know what worked and if anything worked, and yeah, we're sorry, we've learned, we'll do it better next time. That was kind of what they did, and so that was my wow moment, because I don't believe it at all. I think it was an emergency for sure, and emergencies should be declared, which it wasn't, should be thoughtfully addressed, which it wasn't. What this was they were taking advantage of a bad situation for electoral politics to get Pat Quinn reelected. And yeah, there was money on the street afterward too, but no one bothered to measure and see if the damn thing was working.
State Rep Ron Sandack with us here. It's Riley and Scott on WROK. He was among those asking questions yesterday and Wednesday in Chicago. Something I still don't think we're clear on, or at least have a definitive answer on, Ron, is how this money was given out, or how the communities qualified for the money. We heard Barbara Shaw on Wednesday tell us something we already knew, which is John Q. Public couldn't get this money. You had to know somebody. You had to be recommended, alderman, precinct committeeman. Someone had to say, hey, I know these guys, and those guys are good for that money. Yesterday, I'm not sure this is you or somebody else on the question, but I asked Jack Lavin, Governor Quinn's former chief of staff, about how these grants were decided. We've got that audio from yesterday. This is Jack Lavin's answer to that question.
How were the grants decided and what the amounts were and to whom it would go? Do you know how that process went?
Well, my understanding is the $30 million was going to be divided evenly among the 23 communities.
So let me stop you right there. So it was $30 million and there was 23 communities that were selected.
Correct.
Do you know on the basis of how those communities were selected?
My recollection is crime statistics.
Do you know where those crime statistics came from?
Barbara Shaw.
Ron, we know, though, that the most violent communities in Chicago didn't get any of this money. So how could Jack Levin testify that it was based on crime stats?
Well, he conveniently said crime statistics. I think he said it 4 or 5 times. That was my colleague, Representative Rebelletti, asking the questions, and they were good questions. The crime statistics amorphous answer was what Mr. Levin repeatedly said, and what he said later on was, well, those crime statistics, I never saw them, but I was told it was based on crime statistics. What Barbara Shaw said was, crime statistics played a little bit of a role, but it was also poverty, lack of education, poor job opportunities, and it was this massive undertaking and a report, an analysis undertaken by DHS. Guess what? There's no report anywhere. The auditors from Bill Holland's office went to Tony Irving, went to Barbara Shaw, went to the old IVPA, the Illinois Violence Prevention Authority, went to the new Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority, went to DHS and said, we keep hearing about this report. Where is it? No one has it. So we're left to deduce that the 23 neighborhoods that were selected had a high propensity of Democratic voters and certainly had high violence areas, but 7 neighborhoods, 7 high top 20 neighborhoods were left off. And I haven't pleaded ignorance to that. Said I relied on others who told me these were based on crime statistics. And so that's what I do. I have to rely on the pros.
Yeah, well, they told me that. I have no reason to think that they would be lying to me, making up numbers out of whole cloth, but it may indeed. And then I love the Lavin pointing out, well, 14,000 people benefited from the program.
Right.
How do you qualify or quantify that number?
Oh, he said, I don't.
No, I know you don't.
He just said, look, people got jobs, people had after-school activities, there were reentry activities, there were tangible touches in people's lives, so there were benefits. And, and we weren't going to get into quibbling with that because, first of all, I'm sure there was some benefits. Of course, we never know what exactly the benefits were. His is pure speculation because there was supposed to be a University of Illinois Chicago report for $500,000, of which, by the way, the University of Chicago Crime Lab offered to do it for free. For free. Shaw says she doesn't remember being told that by the director from the University of Illinois, University of Chicago's Crime Lab, who said, I told her we'd do this for free. Shaw says, gosh, I don't remember that. I think I should remember that. She didn't. So there was no real report, even though the program had an accountability component, a measurement component, because when you put $55 million into a program, it seems reasonable that someone should take stock of it and say, what did we do well? Let's measure where this money went and what the results are. Of course, that didn't happen because there's not even any time logs, any reports for the grants themselves. And many of these not-for-profits, surprise, are shuttered. They went away. So this whole thing was, from a programmatic perspective, an utter and total failure.
State Rep Ron Sandack with us.
The violence problem continues. So that's the really shameful part.
State Rep Ron Sandack with us from the 81st District here in Illinois. It's Riley and Scott on WROK. The other soundbite we have from yesterday's testimony, and this was your question, and I know we talked about this thoroughly last time you joined us on the show. Every time there's another subpoena, every time there's a further investigation, the governor's response is always, hey, as soon as I found out, I shut it down because I'm a leader, and that's what leaders do. We know that's not true. We know he ignored warnings, or at least his inner circle, his chief of staff ignored warnings dating back to at least early 2011. And this back and forth with you and Jack Lavin I thought was really interesting yesterday about when the NRI was shut down. Governor Quinn said immediately when he found out, and we don't think that's true.
The governor's been quoted in many media outlets as saying when he learned about the problems with NRI, he shut it down. You were chief of staff then, right?
Well, the program, my understanding, the program got shut down this past budget year.
That's my understanding, sort of, too, by the way, but that's a different concept. The governor's been recorded as the reporter is saying he shut it down, I think, in 2012.
You'd have to talk to him.
Jack Lavin can't say when it was shut down, though he was chief of staff for quite a long time, and even admitted there was funding for the program through at least this past budget year, and it looks like there's $20 million more in the Department of Labor for this fiscal year, right?
Yeah, we found that. Hey, these guys, just so you know, the answer is yes, and that was an instructive little back and forth. Hardly the overall game, but here's the bottom line, what I learned, and this goes back to an earlier question. Several people testified about the, quote, governor's office. This group of people, chiefs of staff, COOs, deputy governors, deputy chief of staff, blah, blah, blah. This collegial and flat organization called the governor's office, where people point the finger at each other. I don't know, ask him, ask her. They couldn't even, talk about the gang that can't shoot straight. But yesterday and Wednesday, it worked to their advantage to continually say, I don't know, ask Weems, ask Irving, ask Lavin, ask Ross. These people, and this is where this is all going to end up culminating, they all pointed the finger, some pointed the finger directly at Barbara Shaw, surprisingly not in the governor's office, and who retired in 2012. The fact of the matter is no one took ownership and responsibility for an utterly, really despicable and shameful program with best intentions, because it was hurried, and this is where we got Lavin, too, by the way. He takes his, COO hat off, and on a weekend, as a campaigner for the governor, sends out an email talking about how to use the governor's neighborhood initiative in its messaging. This is 3 days after he asked someone on state time to develop the darn plan. So it's a concept on September 2, 2010. And on September 5, 2010, on a Sunday, he's sending out emails saying how this program is something we should sell to the African-American community. And he testified yesterday that it was an accomplishment of the governor's. And I said, an accomplishment? It's an idea. Nothing's been done. But he looked at me with a straight face. Well, of course I could sell this. He thinks that's proper and okay.
Yeah, and that those emails were educational emails for the campaign.
Right. Yeah. That's the part that's despicable. And I don't know if he really believes it, but he certainly is practiced at saying it with a straight face.
And it's the timing of those emails, Ron. As you mentioned, so September 5th was the Lavin email that said you should use the NRI as an accomplishment in the campaign. NRI was not even publicly rolled out until a month after the fact, and it hadn't even been put together yet. And yet they're already talking about using it as a way to sell Governor Quinn's reelection campaign. And that's where the questions come in, and we didn't find out, and I don't think there was evidence the past 2 days about where this started. Was NRI a governor's program that then the campaign said we should use this to sell the governor? That happens, right? But if the campaign was coordinating with Jack Lavin and the governor's brother perhaps too, and said, what would help us is if we had this program where we could ship some money into these communities, then we could run on that. And then the governor's office said, well, we'll roll that out. That would be we'd have to look further into that. But we don't know. Yeah. We don't know how that worked yet. We didn't find out in this testimony.
No, we didn't, because as you guys probably know, the access we had as state legislators under the authority granted to us in the Legislative Audit commission is subject, frankly, only to emails and texts and messages on state time.
Mm-hmm.
We were given the email you speak of, the September 5 email. It actually came from Andrew Ross. And I don't know if you guys were listening. He was the very last witness to testify. Andrew Ross was in the governor's office, and then he was with DCEO. And yes, he had a campaign component. He had complete amnesia yesterday. He and Billy Ocasio, I should have asked Billy. I wasn't thinking clearly. But the day, because of all his, I don't know, I only did 10% of stuff. I don't know. I should have asked him, do you know where you are right now? Well,
I'm gonna have to get back to you on that one.
Yeah, but Ross was more suspect. He couldn't remember a thing. Even the email sitting in front of him that he turned over responsive to our subpoena, which included the September 5 email that Lavin wrote that Ross was a recipient of, he couldn't remember a thing. It was 4 years ago. It was remarkable, the lack of memory that guy has. I'm surprised he could find his way home. He could remember where he lived.
State Rep. Ron.
There is more to come by someone else, guys. I think someone else will be looking.
I was going to say that two federal grand juries are still looking at the program, and in the midst of these hearings, the governor's office admitted there was an additional subpoena issued for more data, more emails, more documents from this. So this is still going on.
Oh yeah, the authorities that look into crimes and potential criminal activity continue, and what you're speaking of course, it was a September 26th subpoena, and we learned about it, yesterday, 2 days ago, that went to Jack Catrone, who now is the head of the Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority, and Warren Ribley, who testified late Wednesday, former DCEO chair. And, the component we haven't talked about, because it's just not that sexy, is the DCEO component. And you're thinking, what does economic development and opportunity have to do with a neighborhood recovery initiative? And you'd be right, but what we learned is that these folks at DCEO claim HUD money, federal HUD money, could be utilized, and they got permission from the feds to use it in connection with microloans to three favored little banks or outlets for, to communities, to economically distressed communities where violence occurs. Though no one could show me, or anybody, the HUD authority to take federal dollars and use it to fight violence.
Another glorious day in Illinois. State Rep. Ron Sandack, we appreciate you taking time out of your day. I never want to be in the kind of trouble that I have you questioning me.
Thanks, guys. It was a pleasure.